Hello everyone and welcome. Daniel, my friend, I love you. I know you're probably watching this. You may even have a few people messaging you or sending this to you. I'm even going to be giving you a follow to show this is all in good faith. Don't take any of this the wrong way. It's all just for fun, while also doing our job to put an end to misinformation and, I'm sorry to say, clickbait. Some of what I say might be a bit harsh, but it's just going into detail and using facts and real information to correct a lot of misinformation and, in a few cases, lies in your article that a lot of our fans have been confused about and messaging us to clarify. Instead of us replying to every single message, it's just easier to make this video. So let's go. Breath of the Wild 2 release date teased by Nintendo job listing. The sequel to the first Nintendo Switch masterpiece might not be too far off. That is the title of an Inverse.com article written by Danny that was sent to us by one of our amazing Patreon supporters, Candy. By the time of writing this, a lot of other people have followed up with similar questions and confusion. We were recently sent a similar article from the same site by a few other fans on our Discord. This video is going to be a bit different than our usual news videos. The title of this article alone falls in line with complete clickbait nonsense. Every paragraph following in the article has at least one or two things that are just factually wrong. As with a lot of clickbait and false information out there, a lot of people will eventually come across this and spread the misinformation around the Zelda community. It is our job here on this channel to debunk, explain, and correct all of it, which is why we have so many amazing fans. We actually have a great series called Myths and Misconceptions, where we do just that, covering 10 popular myths and misconceptions from different games and franchises that spread throughout the community. A link can be found in the description below and in the eye in the top right for our first video covering the Legend of Zelda series. It has things to make even the most casual of fans cringe and facepalm, like every single version of Link being a descendant of the Link from the previous game, and Link being dead in Majora's Mask. And yes, we use real information with screenshots of interviews with Aonuma, Miyamoto, and others at Nintendo to prove everything that we are saying. So if you disagree with something, you're not saying that we're wrong. You're saying that the creators of the game are wrong. And you, in all of your glorious knowledge, are right. A new episode focusing on the Pokemon series will be coming next. If you come across an article, a piece of news, or something that you would like us to explain or debunk, just as our Patreon supporter Candy and all of the others did with this article, please send it to us on Twitter or our Discord to have it featured in a video and to receive a shout out for you or your YouTube channel, just as Candy did. Now let's move on to this article. Instead of reading through the entire article and explaining or debunking everything at the very end, I'll be explaining what is wrong as we read through it. I'll probably have the article itself on screen, along with proof of some of the things that we mentioned, so that you can follow along with us. Starting off, Legend of Zelda fans have been scrambling for hints, leaks, and updates about the Breath of the Wild sequel Nintendo announced at E3 2019 in June. There's been little in the way of official statements about Breath of the Wild 2, but a new Nintendo job opening suggests anyone hoping for a 2020 release date should hold their breath. So something wrong that encompasses this entire article, starting off with this first paragraph. Nintendo has actually given a few statements on what to expect for Breath of the Wild 2. Things that most fans would likely find more interesting than a job listing being twisted around to make people think that you have actual news on when the game will release, and would probably make even more people click on your website and actually want to return so they can stay up to date on real news. Spoiler, almost none of that is actually mentioned at all during this article. Some of you may say that all of that is old information, so maybe that is why he didn't include it. Although he does already include a lot of other old information, so it being old news isn't the issue. You see, it's best to include other pieces of interesting news with a link that goes more in depth on it at the end of an article about new information, even if it is old. This way, everyone will get the new information they clicked for, plus be updated on important information that they may have missed out on. You see, as we've covered in several different videos on our channel, Nintendo has had several interviews and statements about combining what they learned from the multiplayer of Triforce Heroes with the Breath of the Wild engine for the next Zelda game. They've talked about how Breath of the Wild will be the darkest Zelda game, taking inspiration from Majora's Mask and even Red Dead Redemption. Although they do clarify it will have nothing to do with the actual story of Majora's Mask. similar to how Aonuma confirmed one of his biggest inspirations for the original Breath of the Wild was Skyrim and the Elder Scrolls series. Continuing the article, Nintendo Japan recently tweeted about some new job listings for a scenario planner and a level designer for Breath of the Wild 2. These updates followed a previous batch of position openings for terrain designers, which is a strong sign that Nintendo is still building out the game's core development team. Nothing too bad is really going on here. It should be known that Nintendo is constantly hiring new people for development teams. You will even find them and other developers hiring people to work on a game months or days before it releases. They will also hire people for a game after it releases. This would be to either have them help the team with patches, updates, but could even be to help on DLC or expansions. It could even be to hire people for the next game or something unannounced. This likely isn't the case for Breath of the Wild in this article, but an example would be if, let's say, God of War 2 is about to release, and PlayStation wants to hire new people to help on God of War 2, but don't want to announce God of War 2 or hint at it just yet. So they will just advertise they are hiring for the newest game. This way they can hire new staff for their upcoming game without ruining the surprise of the announcement. In this case, Nintendo still has the core development team. They had more employees than ever to work on Breath of the Wild. They even hired a huge amount of people from Monolith Soft to help, which now has resulted in Monolith Soft hiring for their own Zelda games development team. So the core development team is likely still there at Nintendo. They could be expanding it though. The original Breath of the Wild took 300 developers nearly 5 years to build. Nintendo first announced the game in 2013, 4 years before it came out. A 1-year turnaround since the announcement of Breath of the Wild 2 sounds overly ambitious, but fans of the series might not need to wait all that much longer. This is a bit of misinformation as well. Nintendo began pre-production of what would become Breath of the Wild before Skyward Sword even released. In interviews, Nintendo has stated that they will typically begin pre-production of their next games while nearing the end of the current game. In Breath of the Wild's case, during Skyward Sword's release, Nintendo mentioned how they had a lot of ideas that they loved, but they felt out of place in Skyward Sword, so they would keep the idea or concept for whatever the next game would be. Nintendo began creating the engine that would go on to be used in Breath of the Wild around this time as well. It was even shown off in 2011 with a lot of other concepts with the Zelda Wii U tech demo. They even explained that it was just a concept of what Twilight Princess could potentially look like if they remade it in HD using the engine they were creating for the next Zelda game on the Wii U. They even experimented with Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword being fully remade using the same engine. They decided Wind Waker would benefit the most from the engine, and so it was remade in HD for the Wii U. A lot of people thought that this caused Zelda Wii U to become delayed, but it actually sped up a lot of the development process of the game because, as Nintendo explained, it was Nintendo's first HD Zelda game on a new engine designed for HD on a brand new console. The learning curve was drastically sped up by using Wind Waker HD to learn the limits of the new engine and the new console. Part of the team kept working on Zelda Wii U, while part of the team worked on Wind Waker HD. Wind Waker HD finally released in 2013, which I assume is why he believed Breath of the Wild only first began development in 2013. Oddly enough, Breath of the Wild was originally planned to have only a 3-year development cycle before all of the delays. A 1-year turnaround time since the announcement of Breath of the Wild 2 isn't overly ambitious either, because it didn't begin production in 2019, the year the trailer was revealed. It began technically during 2017 or even before. Since Nintendo stated Breath of the Wild 2 came to be because Nintendo had too many great ideas for DLC, and most of the DLC came from unused concepts from the main development period of Breath of the Wild, such as the Master Cycle and many things revealed in the Creating a Champion book, even stuff like a huge mass of land floating in the sky, and a human form of Ganondorf, which was shown in the Breath of the Wild 2 trailer, were originally seen in the book showing cut content from Breath of the Wild 1. So presumably, a lot of the ideas and concepts were probably created alongside Breath of the Wild, and it isn't like they are creating an entirely new game and engine from nothing. The world itself, character models, and who knows what else is already created and ready to go. Nintendo claimed the reason Breath of the Wild took so long was because of delays due to the physics engine, known as the 𝐻𝐼𝐽 engine, and developing for the Wii U and the Nintendo Switch at the same time. Two consoles, they said, were completely different than each other and require completely different methods of development. With that in mind, Breath of the Wild 2 and Breath of the Wild 1 is more in line with Ocarina of Time, which took around 5 years, and Majora's Mask, which took 1 year because most of the game was just reused from Ocarina of Time and its unused ideas and concepts. A recent and sketchy 4chan rumor claimed that the Breath of the Wild 2's release will be pinned to the launch of the rumored Switch 2 or Switch Pro in January of 2021. The potential console was said to be exclusively for home gaming and will support 4K resolution. We already covered this, it's stupid. Click the link in the description for more information and our thoughts, but to make it quick, it is confirmed the PlayStation 5 will release in 2020. Nintendo would be stupid to release a Switch Pro, which would be a half-generation leap, similar to the PlayStation 4 Pro and Xbox One X, after the next generation of consoles begins. I could see them doing it in early 2020. If they wait until late 2020 or anytime during 2021, I would see them releasing a Switch 2 or whatever their next generation of consoles will be called. Breath of the Wild 2 is already confirmed to be on the Nintendo Switch, so it is possible it could be a dual release like Breath of the Wild 1 and Twilight Princess. Earlier, he begins his article with a forced but decent pun about not holding your breath for a 2020 release, then follows it up by saying the opposite, and that fans might not need to wait much longer. So which is it? Will we be waiting for a long time or not? He has literally no real information to go on. He makes it seem like he is basing his information off of Nintendo hiring, but then most of his article is about a rumor that he himself literally calls sketchy. Breath of the Wild launched alongside the original Switch in March 2017, so the release of Nintendo's flagship Zelda series alongside a high-end console wouldn't be unprecedented. A souped-up console could be a way for Nintendo to let Breath of the Wild 2's graphics shine without having to spend that much time refining the game's engine. That would save developers time and could make a 2021 release a reality. Breath of the Wild also released on the Wii U, but that is just me nitpicking. But in the very next sentence, he does say Nintendo releasing a Zelda game along with a new high-end console wouldn't be unprecedented. Is this even a real sentence? Nintendo actually planned to release most of their Zelda games with a new system or system accessory / upgrade. The original Zelda released alongside the Famicom Disk System, A Link to the Past released shortly after the Super Nintendo, Ocarina of Time was originally planned to release with the Nintendo 64 disk drive, Majora's Mask was also planned for the disk drive, but then released alongside the Nintendo 64 expansion pack. Twilight Princess released with the Wii's release, then came to the GameCube a week later. Skyward Sword released to promote the Wii's Motion Plus accessory. Breath of the Wild released along with the Switch. So that's every major home console Zelda game except Wind Waker and Zelda 2. Let's not worry about the handheld Zeldas. Some did release alongside new handhelds, some didn't. Also, I love Nintendo, so don't take this the wrong way, but a 4K console in 2021 would not be a high-end console. Consoles capable of 4K released 5 years before the Switch 2's rumored release. A console that could run Breath of the Wild in 4K at 60 frames per second wouldn't even be high-end today. Mid-range PCs do that now. In 2021, lower mid-range PCs will be capable of this. The PlayStation 5, which releases a year before this rumored console, is capable of playing PS4 games, which is far more demanding than Switch games, at 8K resolutions. That is 4 times the resolution of 4K. For those of you who disagree that 4K is 4 times 1080p or 8K is 4 times 4K, please look up and count how many pixels there actually are. For example, it's 1920 by 1080, not 1920 plus 1080. Please do research, and I'm sure some of you are still going to comment that I'm wrong, because so many people have done it before, and it's just embarrassing for those people when other random people have to comment and correct them. Now, 8K resolution at 60 frames per second. That would qualify as a high-end console. Nintendo's focus is on energy efficiency and family-friendly prices, which in 2021, 4K will be the low-end standard for almost every game. Again, I love Nintendo, but this is just the truth. and it goes all the way back until after the GameCube. Nintendo's Breath of the Wild 2 E3 2019 teaser looked aesthetically identical to the original, minus a few dynamic shadows that flickered across Zelda and Link's face. The game's development might take less time than its predecessor if Nintendo uses the same engine as the backbone, while offering higher resolution with a new landlocked console for fans who really want graphical improvements. Breath of the Wild 2 looked aesthetically identical to Breath of the Wild 1, who would have guessed? It will take less development time if Nintendo uses the same engine as the backbone. Anyone who's seen the trailer, reads any interviews with Nintendo, or anyone writing game news should know that yes, it's the same engine. Even Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Skyward Sword, which all look completely different, use the same engine as well. The Zelda Wii U tech demo, Wind Waker HD, Breath of the Wild 2, and Breath of the Wild 3, if you're a fan of HMK's awesome ideas of a Breath of the Wild trilogy, shout out to his awesome YouTube channel by the way, they all also use the same engine as the backbone. Nintendo could use ports and remastered Legend of Zelda releases to fill the gaps between its Breath of the Wild releases. Yes, this is literally what they have been doing for a decade or longer. This could also be a way for the company to continue release at least one Legend of Zelda game a year. Nintendo seems content with releasing ports or remasters of previous titles like Link's Awakening or the 2018 Zelda Warriors Hyrule All-Stars DX to fill the gaps between marquee releases. Where to start with this one? Okay, again, yes, Nintendo has at least 3, sometimes even more teams who all work on Zelda games at the exact same time. We have a video explaining this in a lot of detail, and we use interviews and facts shown on the screen. They have Tantalus, who made Twilight Princess HD and is rumored to be porting it or Wind Waker HD, possibly even working on Skyward Sword HD for the Switch. Grezzo, who just released Link's Awakening, worked on Ocarina of Time 3D, Majora's Mask 3D, other 3DS Zelda games, is possibly working on another Zelda game, since it seems that's literally almost all they do is port or remake Zelda games for Nintendo. We have Nintendo's home console Zelda team that works on Breath of the Wild 2, Breath of the Wild, Skyward Sword, Twilight Princess, and the other home console Zelda games, as well as Nintendo's handheld Zelda team that worked on A Link Between Worlds, Spirit Tracks, and Phantom Hourglass. We have Monolith Soft, who just announced they are creating their own Zelda team, and they also worked on Breath of the Wild 1. We have Koei Tecmo and Team Ninja, who just recently released Hyrule Warriors and its DLC on Switch, and are rumored to be working on a sequel, Brace Yourself Games, who worked on the spin-off Cadence of Hyrule, and we have no idea on whether or not Nintendo has yet another studio possibly working on another spin-off or port, like Ubisoft, who has been working on a lot of Nintendo crossovers like Mario plus Rabbids, and putting a lot of Nintendo characters in their own games, and finally Capcom, who worked on the Oracle games, Minish Cap, and Four Swords, as well as a port of A Link to the Past for the Game Boy Advance. He also calls Hyrule Warriors Zelda Warriors Hyrule All-Stars DX. Like, what? That sounds like it could be cool, but that is a very, very specific title and subtitle to be completely wrong about everything. That means 2020 could see yet another port or remaster of a classic Legend of Zelda title. Yes, judging by what seems like 2 or 3 new Zelda games, remakes, ports, DLC, or spin-offs releasing almost every single year for the past 10 years or longer, and let's not forget how many teams Nintendo possibly has working on Zelda games, I would say that 2020 will not be any different, and possibly receive 2 or 3 different Zelda games in some form as well.